Today's topic, and don't forget about my upcoming off-Broadway play about Terra Mystica. Welcome to another episode of TABLEscraps, in which we present a topic related to tabletop gaming and then have a brief conversation about it with the live audience. Let's not waste any more time listening to this weird intro music. Let's get right into today's discussion. Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of our month-long experimental daily web series, TABLEscraps, where I, along with the live streaming YouTube chat audience, will discuss a topic about tabletop gaming, and we'll see where the conversation goes from there. Today's topic comes from viewer Quentin B, who says, with Plaid Hat Games announcing a Dead of Winter comic book, what other games would we like to see expanded in a similar fashion, and how does it benefit the industry? Well, Quentin, I like that your question has two parts there. One is just, other examples of things we can come up with to have expanded into other media. But I like the second part especially about how can it benefit the industry. And hopefully we'll get into both of those. I had a quick list that was given to me of several different board games that have crossed over into comic books. I did a video about this, about the Dead of Winter comic a couple of weeks ago. And in the comments to that video, a viewer provided me with a really great list. These are board games that have already been adapted into comic book format in one way or the other. We have Sentinels of the Multiverse. Battleship Galaxies came with a little comic book inside the box. I guess they were hoping that was going to go anywhere. But Martin LaRoche added, there have been lots of comics based on tabletop games. Magic the Gathering has had some. Munchkin has had some. Dust Tactics had 2 comics that were based on it, which I thought was really interesting. Need I mention Warhammer and Warhammer 40k? Those are really good examples there, Martin. And the Dungeons & Dragons comics that have been around. The original D&D game played a lot more like something like HeroQuest than most people remember. It was essentially more of a board game experience than what we now call a role-playing game. Takenoko, its instructions were a comic book. And finally, Dungeon Twister made a comic. 2 volumes have currently been done with that, if Martin remembers correctly. That's actually a surprisingly long list to me of board games that have been adapted one way or another into a comic book at this point. So what I wanted to know is what additional board games could be adapted into comics, but actually, even more than that, why think just that small? Let's expand this out. What other forms of entertainment, in addition to comics, are board games ripe for being adapted to? And my short list contained 3 games that I thought of. First of all, Pandemic Legacy. Pandemic Legacy is just perfect, waiting to be created into a Netflix series. Netflix kind of, there's no real time constraints on how long episodes are, so you don't have to worry about making them fit a certain mold. And also with Netflix, anything can happen from one series to the next. So I think Pandemic Legacy would make an excellent Netflix drama. There was a game a couple years ago released called Burgle Brothers, or Burgle Bros, whichever way you want to pronounce it. One of those is correct, one is incorrect, and I'm not sure which is which, but I do know that the way I'm pronouncing it right now for this video is Burgle Brothers. And Burgle Brothers, much like this explanation of it, would make perfect fodder for a cheesy 80s sitcom. The whole studio set, the cheesy laugh track, the whole look and feel. I think the Burgle Brothers would lend itself to just the ongoing adventures of these bumbling thieves who are trying these big, huge misadventures. And it's kind of like, Seinfeld meets The Wire, except nothing like that. And if you followed that formula, I think a Burgle Brothers cheesy 80s sitcom would be a big, big hit. Kingdom Death Monster would make a perfect HBO series. After Game of Thrones runs its course, Kingdom Death Monster would fit right into that mold. You never know who's going to die or how or what's going to happen from one episode to the next. It probably would have to contain mature content, which would fit in with what we've seen with Game of Thrones. So I think Kingdom Death Monster could find a good home as an HBO series. So those are just 3 ideas that I've had about adapting board games into other media. So let's go real quick to the live streaming chat to see what ideas you guys have. And then afterwards, we'll wrap up with kind of the thoughts on how this would benefit the industry, if at all. So let's go over to the chat here. We're going to start here with a comment by Kabuki Kid, who says, I adore the Robinson Crusoe board game. It's so rich with theme. They really should consider making a book based on it. That would probably be a smart move. Thanks. You know, I just got to say, it makes my job as host so much easier when the audience comes with their own comedic material. So thank you, Kabuki, for making my job this morning just a wee bit simpler. Let's move on to the next comment here from Zachary, who says, I wasn't the biggest fan of the game, but I would love to see the theme of Scythe come to life. You know, to be fair, that's what attracted me to the game in the first place. So it would seem to me that it sounds like instead of the gameplay of Scythe, it was the theme of Scythe that drew you to it. And if the theme is that rich with possibilities, yes, certainly, Zachary, it makes sense that it would be a great candidate for applying to another form of media. Aaron tells us, Scythe Adventures. So here's a second for Scythe already. Tales of the heroes and their scrappy animal companions. The mysteries of the factory revealed. Danger, excitement, farming. Wow, you have sold me on this idea with your level of excitement there. I just wonder, would the mechs be practical effects, or would they be all CGI? Because that's something I think is very important to us. I don't think it's too premature for us to flesh that out at this point and figure that out. I think it's really an important top priority that we should talk about next. But instead, we're going to talk about a comment from Trevin, who says, Heroescape had an online comic, not to mention an online animated series. I do remember the Heroescape online comic, but I was not aware of the online animated series for Heroescape. Was it just a little series of videos that they produced on their website? If it was, and if it's like floating around on YouTube or something somewhere, post a link to the Heroescape animated series content. If it's out there, post that in the YouTube comments below. I would love to go and check that out and revisit that, because I missed out on the animated series part when it first rolled around. Halfhand83 joins the chorus to also say that Scythe would make a great movie/TV show. Okay, we need to get Jamie Stegmaier on the phone, it sounds like, because it sounds like there is an audience that is willing and waiting for a Scythe live action or animated series. After we figure out the CGI versus practical effects conundrum, we'll have to move on to casting, definitely. So we're already at that point now, so that's good. Kabuki also mentions that a huge disagreement that D&D was originally more like a board game. Miniatures were very optional, and the rules for using them were so loose that people often made up stuff at the time. Ooh, so there we have a comment related to our previous comment about the history of DVD. Not DVDs, of D&D. Even better is a role-playing game that you can play and not have to watch on your home appliance. I'm wondering if the history of DVDs... I'm wondering if the history of D&D would make for a good episode. Maybe we could even put it on DVD. Let's go on to another comment here. Jake mentions seconding Scythe. Okay, actually at this point you're third or fourthing it. It should be a big budget movie so we can see those massive war machines striding across the wheat fields. I'm going to have to rename this episode to just, let's talk about a Scythe movie. That would be neat. Again, though, would those big strides be being made by a mech that's actually built in there? Actually, though, with today's modern technology, we have to ask, would the wheat field be practical effect or CGI too? Or would the wheat field be some sort of strange metaphor? You know, would we just have to have some sort of placard or sign or painting or just maybe a big flat sheet of yellow? Perhaps a sad man in a business suit holding a melting ice cream cone. That could be our metaphor for the wheat field. I really don't know how I got here. Trevin mentions that the Heroescape comic/show was very informative about the world and the story. It hugely increased my enjoyment of the game. Oh, that's good to hear. Think of the Thor movies. It was like that, but it never left Asgard. Ooh. So it sounds like the HeroScape content that was produced actually really did have a positive effect on your enjoyment and immersion in the game. And that's good, because that is the second part of this question, is how does such a thing benefit the industry? And I think that there's two trains of thought in this. One is some people think it will cannibalize, especially like digital apps and other things. Some people can worry that it will cannibalize the industry, but others think that it will just reinforce the, if I had to use a $10 marketing word, increase the mind share of the product in people's minds. But I think that anything like that, if done well, can have that positive effect, especially if it is a game or something that can have some sort of story-driven, character-driven content. HeroScape, again, perfect example of it. And it obviously works, because here we are almost a decade later still talking about it in this chat. So it definitely left an impression on people that wormed its way into their brains like so many disgusting parasites. Aaron joins us quickly to pitch the idea. Castles of Burgundy, the sitcom. Oh, you know what? I see a remake of Fawlty Towers as Castle of Burgundy. Enough said. Sasha joins us to say, for a comic book, a board game must provide an interesting setting for exploring and/or an interesting characters to be invested in. I agree. I would love a comic for Ashes, Rise of the Phoenixborn. Oh, yes, Ashes is one that seems to be setting up this brand new universe and all of these different from one another unique characters that are populating the world. I'm really hoping that Plaid Hat does something more with the Ashes universe than just the current card game. I hope that keeps going, but I hope they let it expand out and bleed into other games or other universes or other types of media. Definitely with you on that one. Christian's going to wrap us up by saying, I think that all dungeon crawls are perfect as a series. And you know what, Christian? I think that you're onto something there, because I have started to see, maybe I've just become more and more aware of them, but I have started to see more and more podcasts that are based on retelling or actually just live recording the play sessions for different RPG dungeon crawls and other RPG gaming sessions. So yeah, I think you're onto something there. I think there is a definite audience for that. And time will tell if it's just kind of a little current blip on the radar, just a current fad, or if there actually is a genre that will be built out of that we'll start to see more of. Unfortunately, one thing that we won't start to see more of is the rest of the comments for this episode, because we have run out of time. But all hope is not lost. You can continue the discussion in the YouTube chat comments below. Let us know what games you think could be developed into other media and what forms of media that would be. Movies, comics, animated series, off-Broadway musicals. Let us know all of that in the comments below and over on our Facebook and Twitter page as well. And before we go, I just want to thank everybody who has been supporting Pair of Dice Paradise on our Pod Pledge fundraiser page. The financial support that we've received there is what's been making shows like this possible to do. So thank you very much. Until next time, I have been Chaz Marler, who, along with the YouTube live streaming chat, has been serving up some table scraps. Talk to you again soon. Are the comics based more on the original game or are the board games more on the recent RPG? I don't know what he said, but basically what he said, it played more like that than this. It played more like a board game.